Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Nicholas Pythagoras, and on this YouTube channel we ask the question, how does the truth manifest itself in the real world, or how do human values manifest themselves in the real world? And this video is a continuation on a topic I find extremely fascinating, which is the East versus the West, or the West versus the East, it doesn't really matter. But the reason I say this is a continuation is because I had previously put out 2 videos discussing how the landscape of these civilizations affects their consciousness, and kind of describing going into the consciousness of these civilizations and how that manifests in the real world. And again, it's a topic that I find really fascinating, and also you should check out those videos, but they're not necessary to watch this video. But they are helpful if you are curious and want more videos regarding that topic. Anyways, so I have been researching and just meditating a lot on this research topic, and I have developed a theory which I think is fairly accurate just from observing the world and observing how these, not just the consciousness, but how these consciousness structures manifest. So the first thing that I want to explain in this video is kind of like how this theory kind of developed is I was thinking of some semicircles, okay? And I noticed that, well, you know, it started as semicircles, but these are pretty much lines. And the lines designate the methodology by which the civilizations in their own respective way are going to achieve their ideologies, okay? And so basically think of the lines as how the civilizations are going to achieve their ideologies. And so on the bottom here, we're going to have order, which I'll explain in a minute. I'll explain what that is in a minute. And at the top, we're going to have chaos, okay? So basically, in a previous video I did, I was saying how the original meaning of chaos was actually how we describe nihilism today. So that's why I say, and think of these lines as describing like the spirituality of the civilization. How chaos is basically nihilism, it's disorder, it's emptiness, it's the void, which is how chaos was originally understood to be. And order meaning like spiritual fulfillment, like spiritual, like, spiritual healthiness. So we have these 2 opposing forces, chaos and order, and these lines are designating how, or the methodology by which the West versus the East are going to accomplish this. So there's a few things that I think we intuitively kind of understand that we already grasp between the West and the East. So for example, the thing I want to start off with is that the West is, they believe that truth is subjective. The West is individualistic, and the West is anti-authoritarian. And I'm not, I will admit, I'm not like, well, it's not just me, but I'm not smart enough to determine how consciousness, like what the cause of consciousness is. I don't know if anyone is, or anyone that I'm aware of is, but consciousness just manifests very spontaneously. I'm not sure whether it's a genetic thing or if this is like a spiritual kind of germ in the consciousness of, or the mindset of these people. But there really isn't a cause. It's very spontaneous, and it just kind of happens. It's very interconnected, and it's very, it has a synergetic relationship. And so as you can see, like, I'm not sure if, for example, that because the West is very individualistic, that makes it anti-authoritarian or vice versa. I don't know which one comes first. However, I do know that these things are interconnected, and their consciousness does manifest in the real world. So we have that the West is subjective, that it's individualistic, and that it's anti-authoritarian. And so on the East, on the other hand, we have that the East is objective. I'll just put OBJ. That it prefers the collective, and that it respects the the being of authority, that it respects the institution of authority. And so some things I want to elaborate on. We can see with the West that they believe truth is subjective to the individual, that they believe that because it's subjective to the individual, that the truth is relative. That's why it's in very Western constitutions, in a lot of Western constitutions, such as the United States, Western Europe, Canada, Australia, that we have to understand this like idea of tolerance, that we have to tolerate one another's truths, or rather beliefs, or false truths, whatever their belief is. Because, well, there is no such thing as absolute truth. We have to, and therefore no one can determine what the truth is. And so we each have to take this very anti-interventionist, this non-interventionist policy of, well, we'll just everyone can coexist, okay? Again, not advocating any ideas. I'm just saying that's the way it is. I'm just making observations. And again, I'm not sure if this is, due to the fact that the West is anti-authoritarian, just due to the fact that the West is individualistic, does that mean they're anti-authoritarian or vice versa? I'm not too sure, but I do know that these things are intertwined and interconnected. Now, the East, on the other hand, think of empires such as the Soviet Union or communist China, or even the Middle East. And I was discussing this in the previous videos of, let's say, how the consciousness, or rather, how the landscape of the civilizations affect the consciousness structures. And in that video, I was saying we have sea versus land-based empires. And I was saying, think of Eastern civilizations, these land-based civilizations, as their object of choice is the mountain. That the mountain is a solid structure. It's concrete. It's solid. It's there, and it's not like the water, where the water is constantly in a state of flow, in a state of flux. Just like how people think that the truth is, that it's everyone. It's this constant flowing consciousness. But the land empires believe in a very objective, concrete, the land is there, and that is an indisputable fact, okay? Or the idea of the communist Soviet Union hammer just crashing down like an iron fist, something very concrete and tangible. So they believe in an objective truth. They need something that is there, okay, that is tangible. Think of the Middle East with Islam. Think of the Soviet Union with this state-run nihilism, state-run atheism, and think of which deals with authority, and how the Soviet Union and Communist China are very collective as opposed to objective, or as opposed to individualistic. All right, the next thing that I want to talk about is that the West gears towards capitalism. And again, this is super obvious, capitalist. And the East is communist. Now, the thing is, both of these, did I just miss communist? Yeah. The thing is, both of these philosophies, both of these economic theories, capitalist versus communist, deals with the rationalist consciousness structure. So both of these civilizations under the rationalist consciousness structure, which is very materialistic, how that manifests in the real world is that people are seen as objects, as just material. And so we see this in the West with capitalism, and we see this in the East with communism. And I will add this, that think of the West as, think of, let's say, authority as the parents and the citizens as the kids, if you will, for a minute. So in the West, you have the kids are there, but let's say the parents aren't. Let's say that the West, because it's anti-authoritarian, that the parents aren't there. And so they're just completely out of the picture. So what's going to happen? First of all, the kids are going to think oh, this is so much fun. I have so much freedom because I don't have parents to tell me what to do. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, which is not real freedom, by the way. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. And what's this going to cause the kids to do? Well, first of all, the kids are going to chase after bodily appetites, satisfying their bodily pleasures, which is going to be, either drugs or, well, first of all, it's going to be sweets. It's going to be some high, sweets and then drugs and then probably, or they're going to chase after something that's going to satisfy their bodily pleasures. Now, the East, on the other hand, think of the authority as parents and the citizens as the kids. So the citizens are going to be, or rather, let's start with the parents first. So the parents are going to be this overbearing, very strict, you have no room to actually express yourself because we want everything orderly, okay? We don't care about the individual because we're Eastern, okay? So we are going to care about tradition because that's the way it was, that's the way it is, and that's the way it forever will be. And so the parents are going to be super authoritarian, having that iron fist, that hammer that's going to be eradicating the differences between the kids. And so what's going to happen with the kids is the kids are going to live in fear because, first of all, they're going to be scared. But then what's going to happen over time is that they're going to stop feeling emotions because, it's not good for someone to feel fear 24/7. So they're just going to start to numb themselves. They're going to start to, they don't want to feel vulnerable. They're going to numb themselves. They're going to put walls up, and it's going to be very painful for them. And also, I will add that because just taking this difference, these kids are living in quote unquote freedom. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, and I'm going to satisfy my bodily pleasures. These kids are living in quote unquote tyranny, which is the overbearing parents. And so that's why, in my opinion, that the West is geared towards novelty, newness, and the East is geared towards tradition. Again, I don't know which one causes the other, but I'll say this. So because the West wants to satisfy, or the kids want to satisfy their bodily pleasures, they're going to look for new things to satisfy their bodily pleasures. And so they're going to think of the new potentials. Whereas the East can't do that because, first of all, they have to deal with the authority that's going to block out any attempt to look for new things, but also because the East is going to focus on tradition because the authority is going to put an emphasis on tradition. This is the way it's always been. And we're going to continue that because that's the way it is. It's just the way it is. So the East is going to be more, I don't want to say backwards oriented, but you can see it that way. More focused on quote unquote tradition. Because that's the way it's always been, and they don't have, again, they're living in fear, so they can't, or at least they were, so they can't focus on newness and new ideas because they're living in that fear. So again, if that sounds confusing, it's just basically explaining why the East is focused on tradition because they don't have that space to fill in with new novel ideas versus the West, which has that quote unquote freedom. So, hey, my parents aren't here, so therefore I can think of new ideas. I have that space to think of new ideas. Another thing that I want to emphasize is that the West looks at things rationalistically. I'll put this as, I'll just put R-A-T. I'll just put rat. Ooh, my Sharpie. Okay, so the West looks at things rationalistically versus the East, which to some extent has an emphasis on, I'll say, the magical. I'll just put mag, okay? So basically, what I mean by this is that the West looks at things rationalistically in the sense that they look at, because they're slightly more ahead and they're looking at things for the novelty of the new ideas. They're looking at things rationalistically, and they look at the world materialistically. So they're going to look at the world as like a profit motive. Like, okay, what can this do for me? Like, how can I satisfy my bodily pleasures? Well, one of those things is having money. One of those things is, greed. And so this, for example, well, I don't want to go into too much of a tangent here, but using people not for their intrinsic beauty, not honoring people for their intrinsic beauty, but utilizing people, objectifying people for their own, whether it's money or, again, satisfying your own bodily pleasures. The West is going to look at the world that way, in the sense that they are looking at the world rationalistically. How can I use the world and tailor tailor the world towards me? How can I use the world to satisfy me? And again, like, I know, like, not everyone does this. This is like an overgeneralization. And I would say the East, as we were talking about before, because the East emphasizes that tradition, and they look at things in a way backwards because they don't feel that pressure, or they don't feel that enthusiasm to look at the novelty of ideas. They're going to have an older consciousness structure, which I would put as the magical consciousness structure, or even the mythical, because they kind of intertwine a little bit. And what that is they look at nature in order to understand, they put an emphasis on nature and animals. So for example, and they look at nature in order to understand other behaviors and to explain things to them. So for example, like when you think of Asia, when you think of Asia, you think of a lot of the emphasis on animals, like let's say like pandas, or you think of the cherry blossoms, nature, or the stillness of the water. There's an emphasis on nature, and also like zodiac signs, or things that there's an emphasis on animals, there's an emphasis on nature. Also, I would even argue Taoism, because I've been looking into Taoism, not because I want to convert, I'm just very interested in religions and philosophies and stuff. So Taoism was actually, the Tao is pretty much the inherent order of the universe. Taoism is to live one's life in accordance with the universe. And the natural harmony of the universe. And so, again, these people, or I would say like the Chinese, or East civilization, the people that live here are looking at nature in order to explain their philosophies, in order to explain just to look at nature to get insight on the way how things are, on the way of how things are. And so that's what I mean by there's an emphasis on nature because of that magical consciousness structure in the East, as opposed to the Western rationality of how can I use the world for my own purposes. All right, so I think that just about does it for this video. I think that covers all the things that I wanted to talk about. Let me know if you guys have any comments or thoughts in the comment section below. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you enjoy topics such as phenomenology, understanding the human experience, and understanding human consciousness, philosophy, existentialism, stuff of that nature, metaphysics, of course. And I think this is a very accurate theory, but please let me know if you guys have any other questions or any other comments or remarks in the comment section. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Please take care. Bye.